Before we begin this episode, we would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we record today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. We pay our respects to elders past and present and emerging. This always was and will always be Aboriginal land.
Welcome to today's episode.
Good morning.
Episode 7. Welcome, Linda.
Good morning.
I'm very excited to introduce you in a moment. So thanks for being here.
Pleasure.
So today's acknowledgement to country, a short and sweet one I wanted to reflect on. 2 years ago, October, the voice vote did not get up in our country. And I want to acknowledge that is... That was a really big moment in Australia's history, and every October and outside of October I will think about this and reflect on this, and it's something that I hope we get another chance at some point.
Yeah, and I think acknowledging those people that are still reeling from that vote and those decisions. So I'm sure it's still very tough.
It really is, and we'll get to it, I'm sure, but I have the privilege of chairing Beyond Blue, and in that capacity I have seen the ongoing consequences of how tough it is on so many people, not just that the vote didn't get up, but it became so divisive as well.
Yeah, yeah. So on today's episode, and our amazing executive producer Taylor has written me a little blurb about you, Linda, but I'm sure she had to work really hard to make this concise because you are an amazing person and we feel really lucky to have you here. And I'll talk about our personal connection in a minute because I think it is a great story. But first I'm going to very briefly summarise what you have been doing and what you're up to. So your official title is the Honourable Linda Dessau ACCVO. So Raj is going to call you that for the whole...
Every time I refer to you.
Yeah, I really insist on it. You can imagine.
And you are and this is not just words on a page, this is absolutely true. You are a genuine trailblazer and an inspiring leader as well. And we're going to talk a lot about leadership in today's episode. So you made history as Victoria's 29th governor and the very first woman to hold that role. And you served our state for a very long time, actually. And you got, I don't know what the correct terminology is, but you got extra terms or more terms or whatever.
That sounds a bit like a prison sentence. So you might want to rephrase it. I did do an unusually long term.
Yes. Yeah. So it was 2015 to 2023. I actually remember talking to you about it just when you were about to, I think, do the next kind of term, and you were so humble and kind of reflective about it because it was a real moment to have I think it's such a credit to how well you were doing it, particularly during COVID as well, which I'm sure we'll talk about. So before you were governor, though, you had a whole lifetime before that, and you had a remarkable career in the law. So you were a solicitor, barrister and a judge, and you spent 18 years on the Family Court of Australia. So you would have seen and heard a lot in that time. And beyond the legal world, you've given time and energy to so many different parts of the community, and you have a lot of passions personally, but also ones that you've been able to contribute back in professional roles from the arts and sport, charity, mental health organisations that I know we'll ask you about a lot today. You have also been recognised with some of the nation's highest honours, the Companion of the Order of Australia and Commander of the Royal Victorian Order. I don't even know what that is, but it sounds amazing.
I just want to do this.
Just give a round of applause.
I'd rather you underpromise a bit at this stage.
So you are. So you're no longer the governor of Victoria, but you are holding other hats at the moment. So you are now continuing your leadership. As you mentioned, you're the chair of Beyond Blue, which I'm sure you are absolutely thrilled to be doing. You are the deputy chair of the Australian Grand Prix Corporation, which I think is just super cool, and an ambassador with the Murdoch Children's Research Institute. Those are amazing titles, but actually I think your most amazing title is that you were a personal training client of mine during COVID. And that's actually how we met. A good friend of mine who used to be part of your team, amazing man in and of himself, gave me a call one day and said, I'm looking for someone to come and you've always looked after your health and fitness in amongst everything that you do. And I had the privilege of coming. I don't think I've ever and will ever have a more amazing place to run fitness sessions than Government
It's true.
House.
This is the first time we've seen each other fully clothed, in fact, isn't it? Because until
How
now, our only meetings were, in
Sports gear.
T-shirt, lycra. Look, it's weird. We'll probably both look back on that time and think, what an amazing setting to be in. And the one thing we had at that time was the luxury of space, because with COVID and in the times when you were allowed to come, you and I were still very, very careful about that and shy of being too close together.
Yeah.
So it was an even more unusual training session.
Linda, give us the review of Mel as a PT.
Yes, go on.
Out of 5 stars.
She's sitting so close. She was wonderful. I mean, you don't always get a trainer who understands the whole person in the way that Mel does. And I've never looked for a trainer that was going to make me jump higher, lift more. I mean, that's not what it's about for me. It's real sort of fitness for life, and no one could be better equipped. And all I can say is she's the one who dropped me. It wasn't the other way around.
So to clarify, just to clarify.
Let's get into it, guys.
Just to clarify. That it feels like a whole other life to me, that I used to run a personal training fitness business. I was doing that while I was doing my psychology studies, because to be a psychologist, it's a lot of years at uni and a lot of placements and, registrar years, etc. I used to do all sorts of fitness things and work in different gyms and run my own business. But you, Linda, I felt like, because you were my very last personal training client, I finished teaching Pilates, spin, all of that.
Ended on a high.
Ended on just the most amazing high. And I do remember the last day I left Government House, it was our last session together. It was that was the end of a 15-year kind of chapter in my own kind of life. And it was a real
Well, I'm glad we met. I'm glad we met,
glad
even
too.
if it came to an
And here we are on a break.
And here we are. So this is a really lovely segue actually into one of the first things I wanted to ask you about.
Yeah.
Health, fitness, well-being, leadership roles. I've always really admired your ability to stay resilient in these, travel, pressure, everyone's eyes on you, scrutiny. You've held these incredibly public roles over so many years. What does leadership look like in these roles?
Okay. Leadership's probably different for me from some of the people you discuss it with, because I've never held executive roles as such. I've been in institutions. I'm institutionalised. So I was, in courts. And so there's a certain degree of leadership, but it's not on that commercial basis that you talk about with executives, and the same as governor. And then I've been in non-executive roles with other groups. So for me, it's always been about the vision and about trying to create the vision and the atmosphere to realise the vision and to take people with you. But, you mentioned public life. It's got amazing privileges attached to it, but it's also very taxing, which is what I think you're getting at. So you really do need to separate yourself from that public life and just do normal stuff as well. And you were seriously part of that for me, that I could start the day just exercising on the floor like other people do.
Yeah.
Before I got into all the gear and had to do things in front of 10,000 people or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, I think adding to the leadership through setting vision, inspiration. I'm working with lots of organisations at the moment, corporate organisations, who are either in or moving towards kind of matrix-based structures, because the modern delivery of product and service through digital and online requires so many different parts of the organisation to come together. So the idea of kind of siloed functional leadership versus actually we need leaders who are able to motivate entire parts of the org that perhaps don't report to them. And so many leaders that I work with struggle with that concept. How do I have accountability if they don't directly report to me, if I don't directly manage them as a person? And starting to build that muscle of, well, no, you're going to manage and lead through influence and through setting a vision and through setting goals. And that's true leadership.
Yeah.
It's not, whether they report to you, whether or not you hold a P&L is a management structure, not a leadership structure.
Well, this is it. I think it's the difference between management and leadership, and also the difference between that kind of waving a stick at people through lines of authority, compliance, etc., or waving the carrot through being inspiring, setting the vision, having people want to have impact because they're following what you're doing. But I think a lot of folks find the management side, they can follow a rule book and it's a structured thing, whereas leadership is so much, it's like water running through your fingers sometimes.
Yeah.
It's like how do you, and you need to have your own style as well.
And both are equally important. I think, we shouldn't, it's not one or the other. Personally, I've been fortunate to have great operational leaders around me as well because the business would fall over if that didn't exist.
You need
Yes,
them.
it would.
You need them. But, Government House for me was exactly what you're talking about, Raj, but on a smaller scale than some huge corporation. But the way it's structured is that there is the Office of the Governor that actually handles everything to do with management and operations and P&Ls and everything to do with that sort of side of a business. And the governor is really the one who determines the strategy. In fact, I think the first governor that had actually published a strategic sort of statement as to what our intentions were going to be each year or what our focus would be. But it was that perfect model where I didn't have responsibility for any of those other things, and I could really be the one that would set the tone and the culture and where we were heading.
So
Kind of the modern CEO, really.
Yeah.
If you think about it, yeah.
How would you summarise what your, in a nutshell, your vision, your strategy, what did your legacy?
I kept it incredibly simple because I thought it was easier for us to keep coming back to it, which was, so no big mission statements or anything like that. It was always, will whatever we're being asked to do or we're considering doing, will it advance Victoria's interests? And it's really interesting at our government house in Victoria, for people who listen to this podcast who live in Victoria, there was a period when the Governor-General, the federal Governor-General, lived there before Canberra was ready, before Yarralumla was ready. And on the door of Government House into the private side where you live, there's actually this big inscription which says Advance Australia. And it drove me crazy because as the Governor of Victoria, you're really focused on advancing Victoria. So I sort of stole that word, of advance Victoria rather than advance Australia. But just testing everything against that made it incredibly easy for the staff to understand why we were doing what we were doing and how we were making the decisions to do it.
Have you found over the course of your amazing career and journey, which you're still on, that your leadership philosophy, because what strikes me as you say that is like there's a beautiful simplicity in the vision and in the goal and in the message. Did you find that something that came to you naturally from the moment you stepped into these senior leadership roles, or have you evolved towards that sort of that way of thinking, that way of leading?
No, it must be natural because until you've asked me the question, I've never really thought about it. So when I was a judge, for me, I would have said to my immediate staff around me, it was always around the dignity of the role and so that everybody was treated with dignity in the court, whether you were sending them to prison, whether you were taking their children from them or selling their house from under them, all the things you have to do in a family court. It was always that concept of trying to do your best, trying to be fair, but being dignified and treating everyone with dignity. So I don't think they're things I've ever thought about greatly. They're just sort of natural.
Yeah.
And they are simple. So there are more complex thinkers than me who probably run more complex organisations and they have amazing skills. But for me, it's always about distilling it to something that we can all comply with.
And I think you'd find the same when you are inspired by other leaders and you're inspired by other executives. Often it's their ability to be simple in the message, and so part of my philosophy and when we were building the Luminary was to bring clarity to the complex. That was the kind of purpose behind the business, and directly connected to kind of how I would like to show up. But I do think when I look to others, I was fortunate to see the CEO of Google speaking a couple of weeks ago, and there's an enormous amount of passion and emotion, but also just a way of being very simplistic. And he runs one of the largest organisations in the world, and yet everything is so simple.
We'll call it clarity.
Yeah.
Look, I just remember many years ago being at a board meeting and somebody who was incredibly clever spoke on a particular topic and spoke at great length. And what he was saying was so complex that I actually stopped following it partway through. And when he finished, the person next to me said, "Wasn't that brilliant?" Because it did sound brilliant. And I went, but I didn't understand a word of it.
Yeah.
And they said, "Oh, no, neither did I." So,
But it sounded great.
Yeah, and so people tend to want to pretend they've understood a whole set of complex theories and instructions. But I think when you're working and you're in the trenches, and particularly in difficult settings like courtrooms, which are very tense and difficult, the clearer everything is, it's going to bode well for things going smoothly.
In those roles, there's obviously a lot of decisions that are made that probably would tug on your own morals and emotions. Have you found kind of this that you've had to separate, the professional role, the decision making, the job that is there to be done, and from the emotional tug of war that I'm sure you would go through, or actually is that's part of it?
So, I think if you take a judge, for example, you're not just born a judge, you have a lot of experience before you become a judge. And legal principles really do help you. So you hold dear to those. So, is it hard to send someone to prison? Of course it is. But the principle is you never do it unless you have to. So in most cases that will, again, give you some clarity around it. But there are difficult decisions. And I remember a terrific piece of advice I got from a senior and a wonderful judge when I was a new judge in the family court. I had one of those urgent cases where you've got to make a really tough decision, and it's worse than that. You've got to do it very fast. And it was about treatment for a baby and whether the court had authority to demand that the parents agreed to a certain treatment or, whether the treatment could go ahead without their consent or not. And I went to this senior judge and I said, "I'm just not quite sure if the law supports me making the decision for the treatment or not." He said, "If the treatment's not given, what will happen?" And I said, "Well, the baby will die. That's the evidence." He said, "It's not really a hard decision, is it?" And I said, "But what if I'm wrong?" He said, "The baby will live." And so helping me through that sort of moral decision, it was like just weigh up everything. What's the worst that could happen to me? The appeal court mightn't agree with me ultimately. I made a decision that was really the best moral decision at the time when I wasn't sure whether the law would back me or not. So that sort of experience helps you too, because I would have given that same advice to younger judges than me many times afterwards.
Yeah, and when you're in it, I guess it's hard to find that. When we keep coming back to clarity, it's hard to find that clarity of decision making. I've just written down principles because when you go back to your first principles and to your point, what is the worst that could happen? What are the outcomes here? What am I dealing with? It starts to become very simple.
But, there is something else, and it occurred to me this morning. I'll tell you why in a moment. But you always make a decision on the best available information, and it's that's simple too, because you've got to have the confidence that that's what you're doing. What that means, and it comes back to leadership too, is you equally have to have the confidence to change that decision later.
Yeah.
And the reason why I say it came to me this morning is heading here this morning, car radio on, shock jock talking, and he was talking about a politician having made a decision to close a youth training centre some years ago and now making a decision to open it. And he was super critical of that change of mind. So I'm not debating whether it was right to close that centre or not. I don't know enough about it. But he said, isn't it an impossible conflict? You can't reconcile the fact that he said to close it, now he says to open it. And I wanted to talk to my car radio and say, there's no inherent conflict in that. He did it on the best information then, presumably. And again, presumably, he's doing it on the best information now some years later.
Yeah.
So that's often described as one of the hallmarks of really mature leadership and just humanity is people that can come back and say, I've thought about it, or in light of new information or new evidence, I actually think I made a mistake or I got that wrong. I was listening to a woman presenting on an online webinar yesterday. She's an associate professor talking about the challenges of the DSM-5, the diagnostic manual that we use and psychiatrists use, psychologists use, and she was proposing a different model that's been proposed for about 10 years now, and we're always grappling with this because funding and everything is based on a classification, etc. Anyway, just a passing comment, she said something like, oh, and I studied that actually when I did my PhD, and now that I know more, I actually think that whole thing was wrong. But anyway, I'll come back to that later. So she just dressed down, 4, 5, 6 years of work because now she knows that actually she's learnt more and it probably wasn't that great a piece of research. So, but you're right, we haven't created the environment where people are allowed and able to say, actually, I've thought about it, or there's new information. This is something you did really well when in our business, when you were trying to make decisions, or I was trying to make a decision, and you would often say something like, is this a door that we will not be able to open again? Is this an irreversible decision?
I stole that. I think that's an Amazon thing. But
is it? Yeah. So let's say it's a Raj/Amazon thing. I found that really helpful. Again, it's like a principle. It's like a shorthand, a heuristic, because very few decisions were truly irreversible. Totally. So that was a good tip. But also the subtext was even more important for me, which was this message of you might not get this totally right, Mel, or we might not get this totally right, but nothing is, very little is truly irreversible.
I don't see any paradox in saying that leaders need to be decisive but flexible.
Yeah.
I just think they go together perfectly because it's all about probably the EQ and the confidence to say, this is what we're going to do, and then actually, for these reasons, it's no longer what we're going to do.
I think you have to go through that evolution as a leader. I've found that personally. So it's easy for me to give you that advice. But I know inherently that I've struggled early on in my, leadership to make those decisions and kind of come to that conclusion myself. I actually did a podcast a few months ago, and this was the topic.
You're doing another podcast?
I'm dating.
Adultery.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's good. It's all about collaboration. We're opening our arms to the industry. It's great.
Fine.
Okay, we're making friends.
Okay, fine. I'll allow it.
And this was the topic. It was about the decision making, indecisiveness, and the cost of that. And how I've had to myself kind of learn. There's only so much data you can wait for before you make that decision. And at some point, the cost of not making it is now greater. And so how do you find that balance?
So for two of you who've held really senior public important roles.
No.
You CEO.
Hang on.
Look, I'll put you on par for just a moment.
I don't have his skills, so that's fine.
Yeah. So both of you have held more you've held more roles than me where the decisions you make have consequences, right? For broader numbers of people. Again,
let's just remove the comparison
of
and
you
like
and the Honourable Linda.
Yeah.
So my question for the two of you then, if you've said you do not see a paradox in a firm, decisive leadership and changing your mind, being flexible, what do you two think about those leaders that we do come across that maybe they just haven't got great clarity on their own values or their own principles, or they didn't take the time or have the right information? How do we differentiate between those leaders that actually should have made a better decision, they flip-flopped?
It's really easy.
Yeah.
That's different. It's different from what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Because if you're indecisive, that's different from what we're talking about, which is being fundamentally decisive. Hearing the information you need, making the decision on that to the best of your ability on that best information, knowing what more information you might need before you make that initial decision, asking for that, then making that decision. That's different from the indecisive person. And changing your mind when circumstances change is also different from flip-flopping, which is about the most undermining thing you can do as a leader.
Yeah, I've heard that word before and it shits me to tears.
Yeah.
But I think it comes back to what you said earlier on, so take your role as governor, does this advance Victoria? If you're strong in your vision and you have clarity in where you're going, I think you can make better decisions because you're constantly checking yourself against your vision. But I find those that are indecisive and, unsure or, kind of taking too much time to land on decisions is because they're lacking a cohesive vision that they themselves believe in.
Or perhaps confidence or belief in themselves or whatnot. So what about a third option? Because there's so much research on the more confidence someone has, the less you should trust them because there is that, often when people get more skilled and more capable, their confidence goes down because they realise all the stuff they don't know, all the gaps. So there's quite a lot of research on be very wary of the expert who's hyper-confident.
There's a difference between confidence and hubris. And so I'm talking about the sort of confidence that enables you to say, I don't know the answer to this and I need this, this and this before I can give it to you. I'm not talking about the sort of confidence which is, you don't have to worry me with the detail. I'm right across all of this.
So how do you balance when you have to make a decision, be decisive, and yes, you might need to change your mind or the plan later. How do you convey confidence, this is the right decision, we've weighed it all up, with perhaps might not be totally sure?
So I think, for example, I think the senior people who worked closely with me at Government House, I think I can say they really enjoyed the briefing process because I'd had so many years as a judge too. I could really walk into a meeting and say, well, tell me what you're all thinking, and the points of view would be put to me. And I could just say, but if we did that, wouldn't that mean this, and is that a good thing or a bad thing? And within quite a short time frame, we would collaboratively work it out because I could work out the questions to ask and then say, well, I think we should do this. And you get there very clearly. But I do think for me, years of being a judge and having to deal with that adversarial setting, not that every other setting's adversarial, but of one side giving their case, the other side giving their case, and having to weigh it all up in the middle, that's a really good platform for discussion. You tell me, Raj, or you tell me, Mel, and you can finally get somewhere from that. It's also really useful around a board table.
Yeah, I think coming back to your three
possibilities,
I think the person that's confident is coming in with a set of pre-built answers. That's dangerous because they're not seeking input. They're not seeking new data points. They're not even kind of weighing up the risks. So you land on a decision and acknowledge, look, these are the things that we're still a little concerned about. But based on the data we have right now, we're going to move forward with this decision. Let's keep an eye on this, but we're moving. Like even that is, a very open, transparent decision-making process, but awareness and acknowledgement that perhaps this might go a different way, but we've got to move, which is very different to the person that walks in and says, guys, I don't need to hear anything. I have the answer.
So when you're in roles where you're being scrutinised and watched, do you feel like you can say, I've come to the conclusion, here's what we need to do, really thought it through, here's some things we don't know, and here it might go a bit wonky. Can you do that?
Absolutely.
I think so.
Yep.
And I think people respect you as a leader, and I think they come with you because it's really human.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not a robot. And so a robot could say, heard information, answer is this. But humans aren't like that. And I mean, that's what we're talking about with AI all the time at the moment, isn't it? The nuance and how you teach and train in the nuance. I think that people who work with you appreciate that nuance.
So this is why I find it unbearable to watch shock jockeys, interviewers.
Shock jockeys.
Shock jocks. Is that what they call
Well,
them?
it's Melbourne Cup time.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah, true. I find it unbearable to watch them when they're interviewing a public person or a politician and they're just trying to catch them out. And it's not real dialogue. It's not real debate.
Politicians can be guilty too because they're also speaking in the prearranged terms that they've decided with their people. And I often think that politicians should just speak more normally too, so it is more conversational and they can reflect the nuance. And I think that voters would be thinking, that's exactly how I feel about that complex issue.
So why don't they?
I don't know. I'm not a politician, and I think that that would be a really hard job. I really do. I think talk about public scrutiny. You're totally scrutinised all the time. But I often watch and think, why don't you just talk to us?
Yeah. So do you feel like you can be you? Do you feel like you can just talk to people when you're being interviewed?
When we were young, and my husband and I, we went to prosecute criminal trials in Hong Kong, and I'd never prosecuted. I'd only done family law and other sort of litigation by then. And I was going off to do my first jury trial, and I was really nervous. And I said to him, he'd done many jury trials, and I hadn't done any. I said, what do I do? He said, what do you mean? I said, how do I address a jury? He said, you're talking to a group of people. He said, just talk to them. He said, whatever you do, no oratory, just talk.
Yeah.
And it's such a good thing to remember, whoever you're talking to.
Yeah. So I've got a question off that then. Cancel culture.
That was a jump.
Yeah, that was a big left turn.
Well, no, there's a clear segue here. I obviously am on par with you as well, Linda, and have a huge following on LinkedIn and really big deal and really important.
Same
right?
level of
goes without
roles
saying.
and decision making. Yeah.
So it's fairly low risk for me, for example, to post on LinkedIn. But every time, just before I post something, I'm thinking to myself, what if I've just done something tone deaf here? What if I've completely missed the mark? What if something has happened in the news today that I haven't seen and this is just going to clash with that? So I have just in the back of my mind, and it's, evolutionary psychology, we all want to not be excluded. It's wiring that it's going to take us billions of years to change. Cancel culture, where you can say just the wrong thing at just the wrong time and that's it, it's over, there's no second chances. Has that ever been on your mind? Does it worry you? Like that jury example with Tony saying just be yourself.
You're not yourself, but yeah, just talk.
Be human.
There's sort of two things wrapped up in that, because one of them is about, do I ever worry that I'm going to say the wrong thing? And the answer is all the time, right? All the time. And you probably do. That's why you're double-checking yourself. And that's just being sensible, really. Cancel culture is a whole different topic. And I've been thinking about it a lot lately, because when I first heard the word woke and being woke and wokeness, I thought it was just fantastic. And it never occurred to me that it might not be. Because to me it always seemed to be about respect and dignity and
aware.
Aware and listening to other points of view and appreciating difference. Now, either it's changed or I have, and I'm not sure which it is. But since it's become so interconnected with cancel culture, for example, I'm not as fond of it as I used to be, because we all say things, first of all, occasionally that are the wrong thing to say, or it would have been better not to say them. To see someone completely cancelled for that, I just think is unfair. But probably more seriously than that, what it does is it shuts down discourse. It doesn't allow for any difference. People are cancelled because they say something that other people don't agree with. And surely you're allowed to do that without being cancelled. So that's where I think it's gone wrong. I think it is it, not me, if you know what I mean.
I think you're right. I think the ability to, we spoke about this in the episode around kind of psych safety, this ability to fight and disagree, and that's okay. That's okay. You can have a difference of opinion. And, in a corporate world, you're kind of constantly striving to build an environment that feels that way, that feels like you can have an opinion. And, what you're referring to, Linda, kind of from a societal standpoint is almost going the opposite way. If you say anything wrong or that is different from, what is considered to be correct, then you could be cancelled. You could be ostracized and, put to the side, which is just not.
Yeah, you can deal with controversial topics, transgender, for example. People have different views on it. Now, it might not be my view, but because they express it and it's not the popular one of the moment, as long as they're not being hateful. Hate's a whole different thing.
Totally.
And I don't mind people getting cancelled for hate. But if it's not hateful, but it's just an opinion that others don't share, or it's not the one that's current, I don't want to see people cancelled for that, because we have to be more mature about how we have our discussions.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Well, what's the last thing you posted that you were a little worried about?
Well, so this is the problem, right? And I don't actually post that much on LinkedIn because I just cannot find the time. And I know, like, I want to, because I really enjoy. There's people.
Taylor has some words to.
Yes,
yeah,
Taylor, let's talk about it. She's
absolutely.
wiggling her eyebrows at me. Because I really like. There's certain people I follow on LinkedIn because they write really interesting content, and I really like it. Really helps me professionally, and I think I've got something to offer in terms of like, particularly that organisational development space, because it's a fairly mysterious space at the moment. So I think I've got some, value to add. But this is that like Dunning-Kruger curve problem, because the more I learn, the more I know, the more professional I get, the more clients I work with, the more I realise how much I don't know and how much I've got a long way to go and all the things I haven't solved yet. So I actually catch myself far more than I used to about to post something and then going, I don't know if this is actually right, or I need to go and look at the evidence more on this. So I don't post as much as I actually used to, because I know how much I don't know now. So to come back to cancel culture, etc., I really feel for younger people, because we are all learning. And if I think about what I might have posted on social media as an 18-year-old, just purely through education and life experience and learning, there would be problematic posts that I would have done, that
All
my
of us.
current self would be like, what was I thinking?
That's why I hate seeing public figures being vilified for something they did when they were 18.
Yes.
Because who
So
hasn't?
frustrating.
Yeah.
And that's all part of development. I love what you say about the more you know you don't know, because I'd have young work experience kids come to my office when I was a judge, and they'd walk in, they'd see these beautiful chambers, high up in a building, nice view, and they'd say, this is great. It must be so easy for you after all the years you've done. And I go, no, it all gets harder.
It gets harder.
And as barristers, where you're performing all the time, you know more and more pitfalls. So you're much more nervous, I think, the older you get in court. Because when you're young, you rock up and you just present the case and you can't imagine anything could go wrong. And of course it does.
Yeah.
And so then that scars you, because you
Yeah,
keep
it's
thinking,
true.
if I do that, that could go wrong. And when that happened last time, that means that next time this could go wrong. So it's natural.
So this is one of the really annoying things about our brains, though, and I think this is really interesting from a neuroscience perspective, because that old Hebbian learning phrase, neurons that wire together, fire together. So the more you think certain things, the more those get connected and there's associations, etc. So that's where we see, for example, if someone is prone to thinking pessimistic thoughts, the more they do it, the more it happens. So our brain, the neuroplasticity, phenomenal lifelong neuroplasticity of our brain, it just keeps adapting. So the more I think to myself, oh, geez, I might have got that wrong, or maybe I don't have enough information, the more those neurons connect, and the more that potentially I can kind of start to, it's that downward spiral into doubt. So part of me thinks I kind of yearn for the old days where ignorance was bliss, where I didn't actually think too much about here's the downsides or here's what might not work, because I just had more of a crack back in the days.
I get it, and I get exactly what you're saying, because I'm now claustrophobic, never was until I was in a tiny space in a pyramid, and then every time I've been in a tiny space since then, that feeling comes back to me. So I think that's what you're saying. Look, I reckon it's great to have a crack when you're young, and you do achieve great things because of it. You should never stop having a crack. But the wisdom of learning is what's good professionally. And I've never seen it as a drawback to see the pitfalls and to find things harder. Imagine if you never found things harder as you were progressing through your working or private life. You may as well give up. So I really like the stimulation of learning, knowing that you're refining and getting better. And so I think that the little trips along the way are worth it for that.
And from a cancel culture perspective, that's where it's like, so long as you can learn and not be just eliminated completely,
Yes.
everyone's allowed to, given that grace and that gift and that dignity of being able to be a learner, because otherwise then it comes back to psych safety. If we feel like we can't stumble and pick ourselves back up again and do even better, then we're not even going to try in the first place.
Yeah.
Well, and I think you want to put yourself in positions to constantly challenge yourself and to grow. Well, that's how you grow. And if, to your point, if you're in a position where you're always comfortable, you kind of know all the issues and all the challenges and all the trips, and that's where you live. Kind of gets boring, no? Like that's not a fun, growth orientated space to be in your career, I wouldn't think.
I couldn't agree more. And, the more experienced you get in your professional life, the more young people come to you for advice, thank goodness, because that's part of the fun. And I always say to them, don't go for the next job if you're not nervous about it.
Yeah.
You've got to have some excitement and some nerves mixed in. Doesn't mean that you psych yourself out by saying, oh, it's so beyond me, I can't do it. That's where your have a crack, Mel, comes in. Have a crack at it, but feel anxious because you should. Yeah. Otherwise, you're really not going to the next level.
And I think I had this situation with someone in the team over the last few weeks. They're kind of stepping into a new room. A room full of more senior leaders, bigger decisions, bigger things at stake, and that's new. That's driving a lot of anxiety, a lot of nervousness, a lot of imposter syndrome, lots of stuff, right? And as that's occurring, something that they said to me was, how are you doing all these other things? How are you doing all these other 5 or 10 meetings and these other bits and pieces? And we kind of had to sit down and have a conversation about, look, those elements that I'm doing over there, they may seem easy, but I've been doing them for quite some time. I'm doing other stuff that perhaps you're not seeing just yet, which are really challenging me. And I'm waking up and having to think through how I'm going to solve that problem the next day. I'm nervous walking into that room. I have the same feelings that you have, just for a different set of tasks or parts of my job, because I've done these elements before. So don't think that you're alone. We're just doing it at different stages of our career.
Absolutely. I have never started anything without being anxious, including the things I'm doing now.
Yeah.
So, I finished being a judge. I finished being governor. And anything I take on, I'm quite anxious about until I just feel a bit more comfortable and confident, and until I learn more. I can remember when I went to my first AFL Commission meeting, which was quite daunting because it's a very male environment. And
we haven't spoken about the AFL.
No, yeah. The most important topic of all. But I can remember coming home and saying to my husband, God, there was so much happening today, and they were talking about stadia. And they were talking in detail about the economics of stadia. And I said, well, I was thinking stadia. That must be the plural of stadium because the Latin is stadium. And by then the whole commercial discussion had moved on. And I often refer back to that because within a short time I was talking about stadia and I knew about the economics of them. But that's what it's like when you start something new and we're all the same.
Yeah, and it's okay. Now all of our lights are turning off, but I think we're going to keep going.
Yeah, let's keep charging on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The conversation is that powerful.
But also, is stadia the plural of stadium?
Obviously, Mel.
Yeah, Mel. I mean, come on.
like,
what would you call
continuum and continua? Is it like that?
If you're being technically correct, it's always, always the plural of an word will be an word because that's
maybe
the
it's
Latin.
Because I'm
Mel, of course.
And I studied Latin for 6 years. Did you know that? So maybe I should know this, but maybe it's just because Tasmania can't even get one stadium, let alone me needing to know the plural.
No, but the other thing...
We're on the way though, are we?
Yeah. Maybe. Are you?
I think I'm part of the cause.
Oh, good for you. Have you got a membership with Tassie Devils?
Not yet.
Can I just say too, you should always not really worry about those sorts of negative, the plurals and so on, because common usage is all right as well.
True.
If someone said stadiums, I wouldn't say to them, that's not the Latin.
I'm going to do that from now on.
Has anyone ever said to you, Governor Generals?
Oh, all the time.
Did you know that the plural of Governor General is Governors General?
I didn't, but I don't know.
Attorneys General.
It
The
wouldn't
same
have
thing.
ever
Yeah,
have
Attorney
been
Generals.
in my thought process.
Well, there you go. We've both learnt something today.
That's where really sensible decorum comes into things.
Yeah.
You're never going to correct someone.
I'm going to bring us back
Yeah.
beyond our English lesson.
Yeah.
We started touching on some topics around young people, how they're feeling, things like anxiety, etc. Obviously, mental health is a big, important part of your journey, and you're the chair of Beyond Blue.
Yeah.
When did you step into that role?
A year ago.
And was there something that drove you towards finding an organisation like that because you wanted to kind of, work with an organisation in the mental health space? What
No,
drew you
it
to
wasn't.
that
It was
role?
when I finished as governor, I was adamant that I wouldn't just jump into things, and I wanted to just really assess what came my way to choose the things that I thought would really contribute. And it was interesting because I was saying no to so many different things, and when I got the call to chair Beyond Blue, I said yes with embarrassing haste. I mean, I didn't even hesitate, and I didn't say I need time to think about it. To have such a well-respected and well-regarded organisation, there was just every reason to step in. And I liked the fact too it had been chaired initially by Jeff Kennett and then Julia Gillard, briefly by my friend Sam Mostyn, who went off to become Governor-General. And so it was quite politically neutral, which suits me very well. And I knew from all my experience in the courts just how much people needed support.
Yeah.
And the whole philosophy behind Beyond Blue of getting people to seek support and help early is something that I so believe in. It was just a natural match, a good fit. So what we're seeing is that people are worried about the economy.
Yeah.
They're worried about relationships as always. They're worried about the workplace and changes in the workplace. Climate, all the existential sorts of issues. And we've had such disharmony in our community too that really plays into it. People are worried about loneliness on really quite a grand scale, and the more connected we are, the more lonely we are in some strange way or paradoxical way. And we just keep trying to give the message, if you reach out early, there are good supports, and the sorts of issues that we face are really sort of quite common, and they don't grow into something bigger if people just get that help earlier.
I'd love to, Mel, I feel like I'll get the timelines wrong, so you can correct me, but it feels like, maybe over the last decade, this idea of bringing the mental health conversation into the workplace has, been a huge focus. And I think lots of organisations are still grappling with where the line is. How much of the outside world do we bring in, and then where is that line where actually this is not for the discussion or our responsibility as a corporate. And I'd love your view on this actually as well. But where is that line, and does that line even exist anymore? Like, is it the responsibility of also corporate Australia and business and, to make sure that these types of things are being put on the table, being discussed, that there's funding, there's support, there's access through work, because the lines are so blurred. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
So there's no such thing as the outside. We are humans, we're humans, we're humans. I come to work, I go home and do trick-or-treating with the kids and don't get much sleep, and that's me. I am the same person. But then we weigh this up with a couple of different things. Professionalism. We still need to run a operation where people can have predictable behaviours from others. There's agreed norms. So we still need codes of conduct and professionalism, and that crosses over so many different things. And mental health challenges, there can be crossover, and it can start to get complicated with things like performance and well-being, etc. And it can be physical well-being as well as mental well-being. But the other piece for me that I think is really important is a fundamental thing we never have to forget is that people's autonomy matters and their choice matters. So I might say, you should go and do this, or you should go and seek help, or you should go, this is the therapy you need. At the end of the day, the first thing we have to respect is the person's choice. That is number one. And it can be really hard. Sometimes I'm in therapy with clients and their choice, from an ethical perspective, I might think that's wrong. Or from an evidence perspective, I might think there is no evidence base for that. That is not going to have any sustained change on your mental health at all, but it is their choice. So I have to respect their choice first and foremost. So same in workplaces, we have to respect some people are not going to want to attend Are You OK Day breakfasts. Some people are not going to want to bring their whole self to work and talk about all their things because perhaps they've got a domestic violence situation happening and actually this is the only safe place they can come to. And if someone even asks the wrong question at the wrong time, they will feel like they fall into a hole they cannot get out of. So we have to be really cautious about forcing anyone into anything at work. But the other piece for me, this kind of element of choice, is this idea, and Linda, you've said this just now, and it's something that always rattles around in my mind of like, we just need people to help seek early. That is 100% true. I was in group supervision this week and we're talking about OCD, can be one of the most long, difficult things to treat, but it is treatable. And working with us, I'm hearing from another psych at the moment who's been working with someone for 2 years, but their progress is phenomenal. So even things that can feel like they're impossible to treat, we can treat them. So yes, seek help early, but that's focused on the individual. What about all of the barriers to seeking help early? Whether you're a male and there is a lot of challenges there, whether you don't have the funds, psychology can be expensive. EAP programs at work are really important for that reason because they increase accessibility, but then there are only typically 6 sessions. So yes, we want people to be supported and encourage them to seek help, but we need to create the systems and options around them that's even possible.
But that's something Beyond Blue works on quite steadfastly because we're aware of that. And we know that stigma will also keep people away from seeking help. Look, I think in the workplace it's really simple. What workplace doesn't want the healthiest and most productive people? And so everyone should be working towards that end. And we certainly, Beyond Blue, and there are others who provide services too, but I'm talking about Beyond Blue, and I think they're one of Australia's most trusted brands, as it were. You can pick up a phone or get onto a chat forum. You can do it really quite anonymously. We don't collect a lot of information deliberately so that you don't, you're feeling bad and you've just made the decision to make that first call and then someone's asking you, for every detail about your address and your life and your date of birth and so on. That's not what it's like. But there is someone that you can just start talking to. You might not enjoy it, you might not want to, but many, many, many people report how that was enough to set them on a path that made things much easier for them, and that's what it's about.
Amazing. So this idea of choice and options is so critical, and some people might want to go straight for the, get on the Medicare's Better Health, go and get a mental health care plan. But I think you're absolutely right, Linda, about reminding people that there are so many options, the lightest of light touch starting points that might just be enough to start to get you to the next little step and the next little step and the next little step.
Yeah.
I want to switch this or connect this to leaders and leadership, who I think are often the ones who perhaps are quietly struggling, but feel like they have to show up. They have to put on a brave face because, their people and the organisation expects them to. Have you found, in your interactions across all the organisations you've worked with, that is something that happens consistently?
Absolutely.
And is part of your role as the chair, and where you are in your career, are you finding yourself coaching those up and coming leaders to not do that, to seek help early, to kind of get ahead of it?
Well, I certainly know what it's like to be in an institution, a hierarchical institution where you're meant to be the omnipotent ones. So nothing could be clearer than a court setting for that. There are so many levels of staffing in a court, but of course the judges are at the apex, and I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just the way the pyramid sort of works. And I can remember as a young family court judge speaking to, we've got a fantastic model in Australia where we have the social scientists in with the judges as different streams in the court doing different sorts of work. So they're counselling some of the parties who've separated, or they're doing reports on families to assist the judge. And I can remember one of those very senior social workers saying, we don't understand how you judges do this difficult work, but you don't have any safety rails around it for you. And I said, what do you mean? Because we just didn't have anything like that. I wasn't even familiar with what she was talking about. And she was talking about how they debrief and all the sort of peer supports they had. So courts traditionally had judges hearing day in, day out about the worst human behaviour at times.
Yeah.
You know, in criminal courts, just trial after trial of child sexual abuse. In the family court, good people, but often acting at their very worst because of the time in their lives that they were doing terrible things to each other and to their children. No support, no hint of doing anything. Now, that's really changed across the last few decades. So I think every organisation, courts are just one example, I think they've come to appreciate that they need healthy leaders. Like they need everyone to be productive. And leaders do carry a lot of weight. And I think they can lead by fantastic example if they talk about it and they talk about the reaching out that they've found helpful or that they think would work for them. That must encourage people throughout an organisation to seek help as well.
Yeah. I know it's something you're passionate about. Getting leaders to kind of lead from the front and be vulnerable and kind of be the first ones to take the first step.
It's the only way. And I feel really privileged to sit one-on-one in a confidential space with individuals seeking therapeutic support, or I do a lot of coaching. So I will sit with the CEO, the chair of the board, directors, people that have these really challenging roles. And it's such a privilege to see what it's really like, because I think I've said this before, we're all a bit of a hot mess and we're so human and there's so much going on. So to be able to, and I think I've said this to you before, I'm very rarely intimidated or starstruck by really, really senior people, because I've seen what goes on behind the scenes and what they're, they're coming to me or they're seeking help because they want more strategies and they want to be their best in amongst all of that stuff. So just to come back to what you said just then, Linda, because I'm really interested in this idea of, on the one hand, we hear from professionals who talk about things like compartmentalizing, and I'll just wrap it up. And as psychs, we're taught how to, like this technique of containment, how to contain some of the things you've heard so that you don't, experience vicarious trauma yourself, etc. But we're taught skills around it, and we still have to be on top of it all the time. And then we hear from organisations around, we've got to process emotions, we've got to learn how to, manage and learn these strategies, etc. And I've heard you say before this idea of how we're wired, and some people are wired in a certain way. So for both of you really, because I've been fortunate to sit behind the scenes with both of you as a trainer and just hearing about your days, and you as, someone kind of behind you and with you as the CEO of the former business we were part of. And I've been able to see you behind the scenes, and you're both really resilient. Like I've seen some of your wobbles, and I've seen you in the depths of COVID weighing up a few things, but I've always felt so impressed by your resilience, and I'm always on the hunt for micro expressions and micro behaviours that might make me go, actually, I think they're struggling more. But everyone struggles.
Everybody struggles. And I think resilience has many parts to it. I'll be interested to hear what Raj says. So, yes, I do talk about wiring, and I think some of us are fortunate in the way we're wired, which gives us a bit of a head start on resilience. But I don't say it in a way that means, I'm wired like that, so it's that simple, because it's not. Because you feed in all the other factors. Your situation can make a difference. If you're well supported by family or friends, that can make a difference. If you have good luck, if you happen to love what you're doing, you put it all together, and I think that gives you resilience, as well as the capacity to sometimes say, I just feel terrible, or that was a disaster, or I'm really down about that. I think being able to say that, and that means having trusted people around you, which is another aspect of good fortune that plays to resilience. it actually goes away quite quickly, I think, if you're able to say, oh, I just feel so bad at the moment. And when someone talks to you about it or you get the chance to talk, you actually feel much better. So it's a whole raft of factors.
I think you're spot on. We had a brief discussion about this when we were preparing for this, and a lot of what you were saying really struck a chord with me because it felt like I was listening to myself talk.
You and Linda on par.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly right. But I think there's an element of, what's built inside of you, whether that's through family and childhood and all the rest of it. There is some wiring. I think that's a thing. I mean, you've seen, Mel, as well, in our business, you've seen the behind the scenes. So it's not all, it's just like rock up in the morning and everything's rosy. There are still moments of wobbliness, uncertainty, fear, concern, all the rest of it. And having good teams, good people around you where you can have those conversations, those moments, and okay, I can come back to where I need to be. I think I found compartmentalizing a really positive thing, although I have seen the challenges that can create as you start to have a family, start to have children. The idea of kind of separating your life doesn't really work. That's not to me anyway. And so I'm having to get better. And I'm not there yet at all on how do I bring all these things together and not try and shut this part out from this part of my life. That's just not going to work that way. And so that's an evolution for me. Like I think early on and over the last kind of 10 to 15 years, that line has been pretty solid. But I've had to start thinking about how I bring those worlds together.
Have you heard this phrase, emotional constipation?
No.
Well, now you have.
Yeah, actually, all the time.
Just eat more fibre.
Yeah, exactly. Do you need some advice?
It's a phrase to describe when it's kind of like compartmentalizing and shoving stuff down, right? Over and over and over and over and over, not letting stress cycles fully like talk through something, process it, decide how you feel about it, let it go for a run, other strategies that we use. So emotional constipation, we see people have got years and years, maybe even decades of stuff, right from maybe when they were a little boy and they were told, don't cry, you'll be right, boys don't cry, blah, blah. It all gets, because an emotion is a chemical reaction and it needs to you got to use it up and off you go. If you compare it to like from a nervous system perspective, if a deer is being chased by an animal, they get all these stress hormones, but by doing the running to get away from the animal, they use those stress hormones and then they just go back to a sense of calm and they're not ruminating on it, they're not rehashing it, they're not thinking about the next one. It's just gone and there's no constipation of like leftover stuff. So I'm keen to hear from you two because on the one hand, I hear compartmentalizing and I hear good strategy, good technique, it's kind of containment. On the other hand, I think shoving stuff down and moving from one thing to the next and it builds up and that's where we see, for example, emergency responders, they just crack it one day.
So maybe what we're talking about is not compartmentalisation in that mental health way that expert way that you're talking about it. I'm talking about something that actually sounds incredibly facile compared to that. I mean more like doing other activities that take you away from the work sort of space so that you're relaxing.
Yeah.
That sort of, watching Farmer Wants a Wife when you've just had a day in court listening to the most horrendous stories.
Which is probably part of the release, right? So like I find that if I start the day doing calls over a walk, then the day feels a lot better. And so the walk is probably a bit of a release where if I was stuck, in the office 3 days back to back, not having that kind of other thing, that other release, the whatever it might be, then I don't feel as good. So there's a physical impact of not being able to find some sort of release.
Yeah.
And, we go all the way back to the start of this episode, personal training and all those types of things are really important, I think, for lots of people.
Yeah. So define for me, as if we're writing a textbook, what's compartmentalizing? What is it?
For me, it's for example, I can remember talking to a magistrate a much older magistrate when I was brand new, because I was in the criminal courts when I was young as a judicial officer. And he said to me, my wife doesn't expect me home straight after court because she knows I need to go to the pub to relax. Bad form of compartmentalisation, but a form. And I just looked at him. I didn't say much because I knew that I had a natural form of compartmentalisation, which was that I just had all these other responsibilities at home. So for me, rather than, and it's very personal, but for me what worked was rather than thinking about work at the end of the day, I had to buy a lettuce on the way home. I had to get a tennis racket restrung or whatever it was that a family needed.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean, and it might not be what you're talking about with compartmentalisation. That and always doing other activities like, school council, which was really different from work and generally positive, or other boards or committees. So I could just go from one thing to another and cut off from one to another, and that just gave me a much sort of healthier overview of the world, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think about it a lot in a work context. So in a day, I'm able to I can almost see it in buckets. There are different buckets, and I think I can be pretty good at not mixing the buckets because they don't need to be mixed. And my work is so varied. I have so many different things, and I can do that by compartmentalizing. So I'm probably not thinking about it from a compartmentalizing my entire life because I think that what I was saying earlier, I don't think that's working very well. But from a work perspective, actually, it's a really solid strategy for me. And if I can physically see it as buckets.
So can I. I can see it.
Yeah.
When you're coding.
Yeah, all the time. Yep.
Me too.
Yeah.
Someone I'm working with at the moment.
What's your favourite coding language?
Python.
Good.
Did that sound good? Java?
Yeah, all great.
That's pretty good,
all
right?
Great. All of them.
Facebook?
Yeah, Facebook.
So someone, a really senior IT person I'm coaching at the moment, his analogy is he said something, I can't remember the context, but he's like, I've just got all these open brackets. So I think in coding there's brackets, right? And in psych we might call those open loops. So things that you just haven't closed. So he said, I need to close some brackets on things because he's managing risk and stuff at home and all these things. So his mental load is enormous because he's got all these open brackets. So your buckets, you might not have closed any buckets, so you're carrying them all. So I guess my question for both of you is, because there's distraction techniques or redirecting attention techniques, just having a break, letting your system relax, that is absolutely really well known, well documented, great strategies. We all need those relaxation, regeneration strategies. But what about just the closing of the loop? Like, let's say you go from one meeting where we're talking about a really tricky people issue, and then you've got to, I would watch you jump from one call where we're talking about something really serious, perhaps the future of someone in the organisation. We really want to get it right. And then you have to jump on a call with a client and be cheerful, Raj.
Yeah.
And you would seamlessly move between the two. But I think it's because I knew that even though there was an open bracket or an open bucket, we'd come back to it.
I think there's two things for me. One, I love that part about my job. So I don't see it as a bad thing. I actually quite enjoy hopping from different things. If I just did one thing, I think I'd be really bored or I'd be really annoying to everyone around me.
Taylor's laughing. Taylor's.
Yeah,
I think that means you're annoying anyway.
Yes.
Is that what that means?
Yeah, one or the other. And then I think I've had to get better at figuring out how many buckets I can actually have at any given time. So there is a finite number of buckets that I can have.
Yep.
I'm still figuring that out, I think.
But, I think it's the same, so I don't need to add much. But I think my favourite bucket is there's a time every day, usually late at night, where it's just about me.
Yeah.
Totally about me.
Yeah.
Watching stuff that you really shouldn't even tell anyone you're watching. It's just sort of so relaxing and so vanilla or so different from what you've done during the day that's the recharge you're talking about.
What are your tips for people? Because this is one of the most common things I work with senior people in coaching is that switching off, that Adam Fraser, I think it is, talks about that third space, that idea of the gap between, the pub, to use your example from before, or going to the gym or whatever. So many people struggle to do what we call psychological detachment, where you're not thinking about work. And if your brain is thinking about work, you may as well be at work, the experience your body is.
Well, I think it must vary for everyone and their body clocks too. But for me, what works is that I just love early mornings, and I don't mind how early I start, and I just tackle the world, and the world's so easy in the morning.
Yeah.
But for me, the world seems to get harder later in the day. It's its fault, not mine.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I do is always relaxing.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what choice you make. Some people would say the opposite because they work better at night. But for me, I always sleep well because I just have this lovely 40 minutes, an hour late at night. I think it was the hardest part about being a mum when you've got little babies that don't give you that time late at night because they actually make demands then. So again, some of it's situational and you have to work out different means then.
I was just thinking about the kind of situations and different environments because what you did back at the Loomery during COVID, that third space thing was
Session
massive, I think, for lots of people because people were working from their like living room desk to their living room table for dinner to the living room, like it was just one thing the whole time. And all of a sudden you brought that concept in and everyone went, oh yeah, I need that third space. I need to go from the desk to whatever,
something
outside,
else.
something so that I change before I walk back in.
Yeah.
I needed it. Like I worked in the, I had a room, which is the office, but to go from the office to the living room to play with the 2-year-old.
3 seconds.
While we're trying to figure out how we're going to, replenish 60% of the revenue we just lost because all these customers stopped because of COVID. It's like, that's insane.
Yeah.
That's impossible to deal with.
Yeah.
So that was huge, but probably less relevant now because I don't have the same challenge. We're not dealing in the same environment. So different tactics and tools and techniques, the more you have in your bag of tricks from all the experience and all the situations you've been in, you kind of pull from that.
Yeah.
And as much as commuting sucks, it does offer that third space for people. They have that transition point. They can daydream. So for you two, give us a hot tip, and we've just got a few more minutes.
Okay.
And thank you so much for this amazing discussion so far. Give us your hot tips for other leaders in an organisation who, you're right, they need to balance being real, being human, not being a robot, with also instilling confidence and faith and this sense of, I've got you back. What are some of your tips for how they can manage their own stress, nervousness, etc., so they can show up and be balancing humanness with leadership?
I reckon one of the things that everybody can remember, whatever level, whether they're leading from a lower base or from the top of an organisation, is just that aspect of humanity that we're all kind of the same. So I learnt it in technicolor detail as governor, where I'd be hosting world leaders. And if you actually just started talking to them as people, no one was any different at all. There would be people who were quite formal and we were talking very transactionally about what was best for Victoria and what was best for their nation and so on. And then you'd start talking about the kids and grandkids. Whole different relationship would develop. Or you'd be walking in to both make speeches to a very big crowd. One of them from a country I won't mention turned to me and said, I get nervous every time I do this. Or they'd be saying to our staff, where do I stand again? Can you just remind me? So everybody's the same. And I think as leaders, if you remember that, you handle everyone and every situation better. And when you're young and coming through, if you remember that everyone's the same and that if your boss or the head of the organisation makes it look as though it's all incredibly easy to him or her, it's no easier for him or her than it is for you. And that common humanity, I think, makes a leader better and makes everyone in an organisation better.
Amazing. And I think that applies to come back to Beyond Blue for a sec and mental health. I think that applies exactly the same for mental health as well. Not thinking, am I the only one who finds this hard or is feeling anxious? Everyone has these patches.
I can't add anything to that, so I do want to ask a question. As you think about your career and then kind of the legacy that you're creating and what you want to be kind of known for, the things you stood for, the things you achieved. How do you wrap that up? How do you describe yourself and what you have achieved and continue to achieve? And how do you think about legacy?
So I don't think about legacy, and I don't want to talk about myself in terms of legacy. And I think if other people want to talk about me, that's fine. And I'm not just being, pretending to be humble. I just don't think of it in those terms. I think I've thought about the roles I've inhabited very much as roles rather than me. I've never confused myself with the role that I'm representing or the institution I'm representing, which I think is a great way of staying grounded. I'm keeping it real, as the kids would say, because I used to say to the young aides who came to Government House, I'm really, when I'm working, I'm the governor and I represent the role of the governor, but I still am actually Linda, and I never confused the two. And as a judge, I never confused the two. When people bowed to me each time they came into court, I knew they were bowing to the crest, the seal behind me. So they're bowing to the institution. So I think if you remember that, you don't get ahead of yourself thinking about legacy. And I would just hope people would think that I did work with integrity and did no harm to these institutions that I've represented, because you do always want to leave them in better shape than when you found them. So if you haven't damaged them, that's a good legacy.
That's fantastic.
So last question, and we didn't talk about you being the first female governor of Victoria, and I think often conversations about females in leadership are really important for us to have and to have in an ongoing way. So last observation question for you, Linda. I did a conference in somewhere, England, London, years ago, and the former head of the British Secret Service was speaking. She's like a baron. And it was so cool because I was a keynote speaker and they told us, we can't tell you when you're speaking because we've got no idea when the Baron's going to arrive. And she, even years after she'd done the role, she arrived in a helicopter, Secret Service. So someone was presenting and then had to pause because they hoisted her up on stage and then off she went. So it was whole like James Bond style. Yeah. So she was so real and human, but she got up, and I will never forget this, and this is probably 10 years ago I did this conference. She said she was a young intelligence analyst moving up, the only female for miles, and someone had said to her, this idea of pushing the elevator down to bring people up, another female had said to her something like, just because you don't look like the person who's currently doing the role doesn't mean you can't do it. And she said she had that in her mind her whole career, worked her way up and became the first female and one of the only heads of the, British Secret Service. So what is your, just to finish our episode off today when it comes to females in leadership, because we still have a really long way to go, not just in Australia but around the world, what is your, anything that resonates with you around that comment? Look,
all of it does, naturally. And I think that, one, we always want women to take opportunities. That's important. And I don't think you should ever worry about looking different or being different in the way you do a role. I think that that's something that's that sort of pluralism is what we want, and it enhances roles and it enhances institutions and businesses. But I've always said to women, when you are put in that position where you're the first or one of the first, don't tell people how good you're going to be. Just work incredibly hard and incredibly well. And there's nothing quite like seeing that discovery in people's eyes when they go, oh my goodness, everything's actually okay, even though she's a woman. We never expected that this role could be done by a woman, and they realise that you're just working hard, doing a good job. There's no difference that means the role's diminished, but there is a difference in the way it's done, and that's a really healthy thing. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, don't ever tell people that, don't worry, I'm a woman, I know it's different. Just do the work. Just do the work, yeah. Working hard is a really good hint for almost everything. Yeah.
Great advice.
I'll pass it on to my kids. Otis, if you're listening to this. My 8-year-old does listen to this, so just so you know.
Oh, good.
Has he got beyond episode 1?
He's still emotional about the fact the swear word's in episode 2. You said one swear word today. Just one. You said the S word, didn't he? Yep. So I'll let you know if Otis listens to this or not.
Okay.
Thank you, Linda. This has been such a pleasure to have you with us in the studio. And thank you to Raj.
Thank you, Mel.
Thank you to me. And Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, we're everywhere. We will ask Linda to post this if she loves the episode, which I'm sure she will. So people will hear us. And
we're extremely grateful that you joined us. This is
I'm very grateful.
And we didn't even get to the
chat.
AFL, and we did the F1. Like we could, like there's a
so
follow
many
up
topics.
episode.
Yeah.
Who do you
Here as
support
well.
in the footy?
Essendon.
Oh, geez.
Love it.
All right,
Tough year-
let's wrap
tough year
this up.
And Oscar Piastri, and that covers the field.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thanks, Linda.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
It was
much.
fantastic.